In the beginning, the mountain was hidden inside a huge mountain chain, just as a work of art might be concealed within a rough marble block. The great artist had to work for thousands of years to chisel its magnificent contours. Just like Guido Rei, the Italian mountaineer and chronicler of the Matterhorn, countless poets have praised this unique mountain. Though it is neither the highest nor the most pitiless among the giants of the Alps, it is most certainly the most beautiful mountain on Earth. Though thousands may have conquered it, climbed all its ridges and precipitous walls, it remains a challenge for any mountain climber. Like the first ascenders, most climbers today go to the summit via Hörnlicrest, also called Swiss Ridge. Its most difficult sections have been secured by ropes. Circling the summit by helicopter, we can see Hörnlicrest and the roof. Forgan Ridge. The summit ridge, which is part of the Italian-Swiss border. To the right, the Swiss peak, 13,500 feet. To the left, the slightly lower Italian peak. The South Wall and Lion, or Italian Ridge. Zermatt Ridge, one of the most difficult routes to the top. The North Face, first climbed by the Schmid brothers in 1931. Of all the 20 highest alpine peaks, it was the Matterhorn that was longest regarded as invincible. The story of its first ascent is doubtless one of the most dramatic chapters in alpine history. In those decisive days in July 1865, Karel, Whymper's guide for many years, let down his friend and benefactor for reasons of pure nationalistic narrow-mindedness. He snuck off to the South Ridge, accompanied by a well-equipped team, without telling Whymper. Whymper had come from London to Breuil in accordance with a previous arrangement between himself and Karel. Whymper hurried back the long-waited Zermatt along the Forgan Col, where he joined Michel Croz, the best guide in the Western Alps who was just about to attack the tricky peak from the Swiss side. On July 14, 1865, the four Englishmen, Douglas, Hudson, Haddo and Whymper, with their guides Croz and Taugwalder, father and son, triumphantly reached the summit. Karel was defeated, but no sooner had they reveled in their triumph when the mountain struck back with an iron fist. During the descent, only some 450 feet below the summit, 4 of the 7 victors fell to their death down the horrible 6,000-foot-high north face. A photo montage showing the 7 first ascenders. Edward Whymper remembers. Then Haddo slipped, fell against Croz, pulling him down. I heard his cry of horror, then saw him and Haddo flying down. The next I saw was Hudson also being torn from his foothold, and Lord Douglas with him. It was only a matter of seconds. The minute we heard Croz cry out in horror, the elder Peter and I hung onto the rock for dear life. Or rather, we clutched the rock, as there was no time to look for a better foothold. The rope had been tight between the two of us, and so we were jerked as if we had been one person, and we stood it. But the rope between Taugwalder and Lord Douglas broke. The three members of the first ascending team who had tied themselves to the upper part of the rope survived. They were Peter Taugwalder Jr., Edward Whymper, and Peter Taugwalder Sr. The reason for their survival: Whymper and the two members of the Taugwalder family had stayed on a little longer on the summit to leave the names of all the participants as a message in a bottle. When, on the descent, the two groups rejoined, they all tied themselves to one rope because Lord Douglas, who had become fearful, insisted on it. Their decisive mistake was lengthening the rope with a spare section that was too thin. This rope team had come together without any previous group experience. They were spurred on by knowing that an Italian rope team was ready for the ascent at the same time and might have deprived them of their victory. The following group members perished: Lord Francis Douglas, 18 years old; Reverend Charles Hudson, 37 years old; Robert Haddow, 18 years old; and Michel Croz, the French mountain guide from Chamonix. The rope which led to disaster was just a spare rope, not strong enough to hold 4 falling men. It broke. For a long time, people held the senior Taugwalder responsible for this accident. Eventually, his good reputation was restored. At this time, only stranded hemp ropes were used, and people did not yet know what thickness of rope was needed for mountaineering. There is a story about this piece of rope on the photo. An Englishman purchased a vase at the London flea market, and the vase contained, among other things, a piece of rope. It turned out to be a piece of that particular rope which had caused the accident and which had been given to an Englishman by the owner of the hotel at the time. A few objects belonging to the victims of the accident are kept in a museum. One of Haddow's shoes, one of Lord Douglas's shoes, and the hat worn by the mountain guide Croz. A French inscription on Whymper's ice axe, put there by the owner: "Whenever I used this axe, I was successful." Whymper was always determined to use mountaineering equipment from England. It was only when this film was made that an English inscription was found, concealed beneath the patina of a century. Whymper's signature taken from a letter. Edward Whymper was good at drawing. This drawing depicts a group of English mountaineers with himself in a light-colored suit in the foreground, in front of the Hôtel du Mont Rose. The hotel, as shown in this old brochure, was the headquarters of the British climbers in the 60s of the last century. The co-proprietor of the hotel at the time, Alexander Seiler. The guest book of the Hôtel du Mont Rose contains the names of climbers who went down in history. Whymper also wrote in it about the Matterhorn disaster, thanking the various mountain guides from Zermatt who had recovered the bodies of the dead climbers. Edward Whymper at the age of 62. The accident cast a shadow on his life. He wrote, "An entire life can be destroyed by a moment's carelessness." Zermatt was once a small, dreamy village. Zermatt at the foot of the Matterhorn. It would be impossible to imagine a more idyllic place in this gigantic mountain country. Time seems to have stood still in the old city of Zermatt. The old sun-warmed houses are built of larch wood and roofed with coarse split stone slabs, as is the tradition in the Valais Alps. Zermatt Cemetery has become the final resting place for many victims of the mountains. The tomb of the Taugwalders, father and son, guides from Zermatt and members of the team that first ascended the summit. More than 500 climbers lost their lives on the Matterhorn walls, and more victims are added each year. People who perish because of their carelessness, or because they overestimate themselves, but also because they were hit by falling rocks or caught in bad weather. What makes this mountain so dangerous? What must a climber consider when going to this mountain? We asked Richard Andenmatten, a guide.
Andenmatten Richard ist einer der Führer, der sehr oft das Matterhorn macht gegenwärtig.
Mountain guide Richard Andenmatten has stood on the Matterhorn peak very often, about 450 to 500 times.
Was ratest du einem Gast, der mit einem Führer das Matterhorn?
Visitors who want to climb the Matterhorn in the company of a mountain guide should be in good physical condition. They should first test their climbing legs on a 12,000-foot peak such as the Rimfischhorn. Only after this training should anyone try the Matterhorn. Otherwise, they just won't have the condition to scale it. Most problems arise because people are not properly prepared, and ascending and descending takes too long. Andenmatten figures 4 to 5 hours for the ascent under normal conditions and another 4 to 5 hours for descending.
Der Aufstieg normalerweise 4 bis 5 Stunden und wiederum 4 bis 5 Stunden runter. Dann ist das eine rechte Zeit, aber was länger ist, ist einfach zu lange.
The actual ascent to the Matterhorn via the Swiss ridge begins above the Hörnli group. Up to that point, there are paths and mule tracks, allowing even the less ambitious tourist to take home his or her mountain and Matterhorn experience. The path also touches the old mountain village of Winkelmatten. Schwarzsee Hotel at an altitude of 7,650 feet, about halfway to Hörnli Lodge. Most Matterhorn climbers will save their strength and get to this point by cable car from Zermatt. Peter Taugwalder Sr. One of the surviving first ascenders of the Matterhorn was one of the builders of this hotel. He died there during construction work, sitting on a wall and looking at the mountain. On the banks of crystal-clear Schwarze Lake, which is said to hold the tears shed over Matterhorn victims, there is a chapel, Our Lady of the Snow. The story goes that it was built in fulfillment of a vow made by travelers who had crossed the then much frequented Theodule Pass and were caught in a terrible storm. In 1865, the first climbers kept their equipment depot here. All around us, we see magnificent 1,300-foot peaks. To the northeast, the Mischabel group with Dome, Teschhorn, Alphubel, Allerlinhorn. To the east, Rimpfischhorn, Strahlhorn. The Monte Rosa group, with its 6 1,300-foot peaks, all of them offering magnificent high mountain tours. Lonely and majestic, the mountain of mountains stretches into the blue sky, enchanting everyone who looks at it. A strange story is told of the site of this cross near the path leading to Hörnli Lodge. A mountain guide returning from a tour met a stranger here. Coming closer, he realized that it was he himself. That same year, the mountain guide fell ill and died. As early as 1830, mountaineers employed native guides to help them conquer the mountain. In his book Matterhorn Stories, Fritz Schmidt tells of these first mountain guides. Shepherds and hunters recommended by the local priest were the first guides. Generally, entire caravans set out, which meant that porters were indispensable. Ladies and gentlemen were carried in sedan chairs by professional porters on their way to Gorner Ridge and Theodule Glacier. In the golden age of alpinism, money came to the Valais villages together with the foreigners, and entire dynasties of mountain guides developed. An easy mule track leads to Hörnli Lodge at 9,780 feet. Climbers approaching the summit along Swiss Ridge set out before dawn and spend the night in this lodge. It was first built in 1868 and reconstructed for the centennial of the first ascent. From among the more frequented routes this map includes Hörnli Ridge, marked in red, Zermatt Ridge, marked yellow, not visible, Lion Ridge, also called Italian Ridge, the west wall through the Penhall corridor. Forgan Ridge, seen on the left, and the north wall, marked white, are among the most difficult routes. Mountain climbers in the last century thoroughly prepared themselves for their tours. Some of them spent years of preparation before actually attacking the mountain. Edward Whymper, too, who first came to Zermatt in 1860, prepared himself for 5 years before undertaking his ascent to the top. The first part of the ascent from Hörnli Lodge presents no problems, nor is the crossing of the snowfields particularly difficult. The most frequent problem is the time factor. Anyone who sets out too late may soon be trapped in bad weather. Gusty winds, thunderstorms, snowstorms may put a quick end to the ascent.
Meistens Steinschlag, weißt du? Geht's da hinten? Jawohl.
Hörnli Lodge in the background. The weather is about to change. A slight snow flurry has already started. Lucky are those who decide in time to return, and may say, like Guido Rey, reason has triumphed over passion. Many are already turning back. We will move a bit further up.
Wenigstens bis zum Grat.
Den Gipfel erreicht?
Nein, wir haben den Gipfel nicht erreicht. Das schlechte Wetter hat uns einen Strich durch die Rechnung gemacht. Wir waren kurz unterhalb der Solvay-Hütte.
These two climbers are on their way down. They didn't make it to the top. The weather put a crimp in their plans. They discontinued their climb just below Solvay Lodge because the weather forecast had not been favorable. They didn't make it to the key passage below Solvay Lodge. The fog they saw further up made them turn back. They realized there would be no use continuing. They had no desire just to stand on the mountaintop, only because it was there. They also wanted to enjoy the view. Alpine associations are right in insisting on helmets being worn throughout all climbing expeditions. Wearing a helmet may also be vital at Hörnlicrest, especially if there are other groups kicking off loose pieces of rock. The fact that mountain guides in this region often don't wear helmets is probably a question of tradition. These climbers are descending from Hörnlicrest. This morning there was a sudden drop in temperature and the team had to give up after 600 feet because of bad weather.
Ich glaube, da ist nichts mehr drin. Ja.
Below the so-called set of teeth, 600 feet beneath Solvay Lodge, we also decide to go back. One by one, the rope teams are returning from the mountain.
Sie sind im Abstieg hier vom Hörnlicrest. Das Wetter ist
These climbers are descending from Hörnlicrest. This morning there was a sudden drop in temperature and the team had to give up after 600 feet because of bad weather. The guide tells us that weather conditions were unusually bad today. It had been fine in the morning, then the weather suddenly changed. At the beginning it was much too hot, then it began snowing heavily and a strong wind started to blow. They might have managed, but it would have involved too many risks and returning halfway is just not worth it. 10 inches of fresh snow presented additional difficulties. They didn't run into any climbing problems during the ascent, but the way down was difficult because of the snow. They found they soon needed crampons on the ascent. They also had to use them for the descent. The Matterhorn is a mountaineer's dream. He isn't sure if he'll try it again, though. His physical condition just wasn't up to snuff at his advanced age. We set out at 5 o'clock in the morning. The weather was fine. It seemed like a beautiful day was in the offing. 1 hour after we started climbing, clouds gathered and it began to snow. Going beyond Solvay Lodge was just too dangerous. We're happy to be back down again.
Et à Solvay, au refuge Solvay, c'était vraiment délicat de continuer, quoi.
Wie hat's denn so geklappt?
Ja, es war sehr anstrengend.
The sudden snowfall made climbing very exhausting. The last part was particularly fatiguing, this climber says. Without his guide, he would never have made it to the top. Although he is an active climber, he found this climb very rough. The mountain guide has also found today's conditions unusually bad. They had sudden snowfall on the summit, and they didn't stay long. It took them 3 hours and 50 minutes to get up there. Some job. Only 3 groups made it to the summit today.
Und für mich war das war schon anstrengend, aber ich bin froh, dass es geklappt hat.
Viel schwieriger mit Steigeisen zu klettern ist halt sowieso viel schlimmer. Oben ist ziemlicher Schneeeinbruch gewesen. Dann haben wir uns nicht lange versäumt auf dem Gipfel. Gerade kurz gefilmt und nachher sind wir wieder umgedreht und weg.
Wie lange haben Sie gebraucht bis hoch zum Gipfel?
Bis 4 Stunden, nicht ganz, 3 Stunden und 50 Minuten. War eine sehr gute Zeit.
Kamen Seilschaften auf dem Gipfel, die führerlos waren?
Nein, heute haben alle umgedreht. Da sind nur die 3 Führer. 3 Führer hoch und einer war noch unten in den Seilen und der hat dann auch umgedreht.
An abrupt change of weather is best observed through binoculars from inside Hörnli Lodge. Something that seemed easy and well within the limits of physical condition on the mountain often turns into agony or even catastrophe in rough weather. In the 14 years of Zermatt's existence, there have been many dramatic rescue operations, many of them going right to the limit. But everything always worked out fine. This aircraft has flown more than 5,000 hours, mostly on rescue missions. Zermatt has carried out more than 5,000 rescue missions in this period. Some dramatic rescues did, of course, take place near the Matterhorn. Finding operations in particular are very dangerous. Last but not least, because you have to go very close to the mountain walls, which means that you come into a rockfall zone. If a rock, it need be no bigger than a human fist, hits the rotor blades, the helicopter may crash with all its passengers. Emergency landings are impossible during winding operations. The helicopter would stall with the rotor blades touching the rock, and the engine would crash with all the crew inside. That is why a winding operation is dangerous and should be avoided wherever possible. Rescue missions should not become routine, otherwise climbers will be less careful and pay less attention, with resulting increases in the risk factor. In the foreground, Obergabelhorn, Wellenkuppe, Rothorn, Weißhorn, one of the most beautiful alpine peaks, and Dent Blanche to the west. To the east, Monte Rosa, at 13,900 feet, the highest Swiss peak. Löss Ridge, Castor and Pollux, the Breithorn with its 4 peaks, and the Little Matterhorn. All these are peaks higher than 12,000 feet, which had already been climbed between 1813 and 1864. The weather has improved. Tomorrow we'll give it another try. We set out at 3 o'clock in the morning. We have to use flashlights to find our access in the dark. Our film lights illuminate the rock. The rock is wet. We've got to be careful. We climb slowly, one at a time. Countless climbers' boots have polished this rock. They come from all parts of the world to climb the Matterhorn. This is a Japanese rope team. Between Solvay Lodge and the summit, ascending and descending groups sometimes get in each other's way. The upper Moseley slab is a touchstone. This is where the first difficulties arise and physical condition is put to a hard test. The slab is more than some climbers can handle, and they have to turn back. The first groups are now coming down from the top. At this point, above the ice-covered shoulder, the final act of strength begins, along 750 feet of fixed rope. Though the remaining stretch to the top is made a little easier by these ropes, the incline is very steep. We are now looking back at the 900-foot-long ridge in the background. The fixed ropes provide a good deal of additional safety, especially during descent and on icy rock. There are a number of rope teams on their way, some moving up, others already coming down.
Wir gehen dann noch ein Stück weit das Seil hoch, gell? Friedrich.
The good weather seems to be holding. We've been on our way for 4 hours now, but we still have to overcome the steep roof between us and the summit. Another hour of grueling exertion. A view of the ice-covered shoulder through the telephoto lens. We have arrived at the steep roof. Just another 300 feet to the top. After a 5-hour climb, we are now standing on the summit, 13,434 feet up. Conquering this unique monument of granite and marble represents the fulfillment of a long-cherished dream, triumph and joy over a successful endeavor, and immense gratitude that we were able to experience this moment.